Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pathways to Productivity. Well, if supply chain management wasn't on your radar before COVID-19, I'm betting it definitely was afterwards. Effective supply chain management has to be one of the most important productivity topics for businesses today. And with us on this episode, we've got a special guest who's going to help demystify supply chain management for us. So stay tuned. I'm Chris Baker, one of our regular hosts, and with me, as usual, is Mr. Tony Taslim. How are you this week, Tony?
Very good, Chris. Thank you for that. And how are you?
Yeah, well, I'm doing well, just surviving the heat, though. It's getting pretty warm up here. And now I'd like to introduce our guest, Mr. Reto Fuhrer from RF Supply Chain Solutions. Reto has a really strong background in supply chain management and has consulted widely on the topic. He's a regular speaker on this topic over the past decade. Welcome, Reto, and perhaps you could kick off and tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and RF Supply Chain Solutions.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tony, for having me. Appreciate the invite. Yeah, so my background is supply chain logistics. I've been working over years in that space in several different executive positions, different industries like automotive, food manufacturing, sports, events, logistics, and many more. And yeah, so since about 4 years now, I have my own business, which is called RF Supply Chain Expertise, and we help organizations around the world to improve their supply chain and logistics processes. And that's about me. Thank you.
All right, terrific. Well, it's great to have you here. Tony and I have been very much looking forward to talking to you today. And I think this is an episode that our audience is going to find very interesting. Maybe a good place to start, from your perspective, what is supply chain management and why is it so important?
That's a very good question, Chris. And I guess if you speak to 10 different organizations, you probably get 10 different answers. And that's already the biggest challenge in the whole piece. So what I've noticed here in Australia, supply chain management is a lot underrated. Like businesses see in supply chain management often just the procurement process, buying something for the factory or for the trade. But in fact, supply chain management is way more. Like if you go back to an old saying, what it means, you can find anywhere on the internet the 6 R's. So having the right product in the right quantity, at the right quality, at the right time, in the right place, with the right cost involved. And when you look at this as a holistic process, you can say pretty much the whole business, whether it's manufacturing or trade, is involved in supply chain. And that's a very, very important thing to realize for businesses. So when you're talking about the right product, you need to have the sales and the R&D involved to find out about the market, what kind of product you want to sell, where there is a niche for it, where there's a market for it. Quantity is a very important thing in terms of planning. And that's actually a function which is very much underused in Australia. Everything starts with the market, with the plan, with the customer. And who is in connection with the customer? It's the sales team. So the sales team becomes a different role in modern supply chain management. It's not just about bringing in sales orders or contracts. It's about information into the business, what our customers want at which time, what their plans are, Because if we don't know that, you can do whatever you like in your whole process. You can set up your manufacturing space. You can set up your supplier relationships. If you don't know what's going on, you're always going to be wrong. So it really starts at the front end. With the sales team. So that's one thing which I think is very, very important. And then obviously it goes through the factory, through logistics, bringing the right parts at the right time, at the right workstation, making sure that you have the right inventory in-house at the right time, in the right quality, because you don't want to produce rubbish for your clients. Goes then in a kind of a collaboration piece between logistics and manufacturing. And as I said before, really important, procurement. You need to have a connection with your suppliers. You need to share information with your suppliers so that they can prepare the best for your demand. If they don't know what's coming, how can they prepare? And then the whole finance piece is obviously also important. So every organization has a finance department, how big it is, no matter how big it is, and they need to deliver the right measures in terms of what we measure to see that we can improve productivity and rentability of the business. So as a summary, you can see basically supply chain is a red thread which goes through the organization. And if we don't work collaboratively together with different teams, it's really hard to get the best possible outcome. And that's where a lot of businesses struggle. They still work in those silos and everyone is in charge of a certain topic, but the exchange of information and the collaboration is often a bit missing, where you can make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think that's a terrific introduction and overview to supply chain management. And just hearing all of that, I'm really not surprised that lots of organisations do struggle a bit with this. You've talked about the importance of process, the importance of planning, the importance of all those different teams within the business working together. You didn't mention a forecast as such, but I know you were alluding to it when you talked about sales, informing the business of what to expect in terms of production over the year or sales volume over the year, which implies we'll need to have some form of forecast there. So I think we want to get to those things a little bit in this conversation. And perhaps give a little bit of an action plan for our listeners as we get towards the end of it. Before we do that, though, perhaps let's talk about, because it is challenging and it would be very easy for business to go, oh, well, we'll stick with the status quo and we won't do anything. If they don't do something about this, if businesses don't work hard to optimize their supply chain management, what sort of symptoms do you think they're likely to see?
Well, there's a lot of symptoms which you can see of businesses which are not really set up well. One key thing or one major thing which I'm noticing when I go in is that businesses who constantly need to change things, shuffle things around, normally have a supply chain problem, because that leads to one of the most common problems in manufacturing, where people say, where are my parts? I don't have my parts. Or I have the wrong part, or the part not in the right quality. And that then leads to the reshuffling of the production schedule. And when you have to reshuffle the production schedule, what happens then? That means you have chaos. You have chaos in the whole organization, because procurement all of a sudden needs to run after different materials or parts which were actually not planned to be here at that time. If the schedule would have been hauled up to speed, you have potentially to reshuffle the shifts, like doing overtime, which causes a lot of waste, if you like, additional cost. And normally, when you go from a day shift to a night shift, or even to a 24/7 operational setup, then the bigger the shift is, the more costs are involved. That's one thing. And then another thing which is a sign when businesses, I don't think, have things under control, is if when you have increasing material costs, that means that in cost of goods sold, that means that something probably is wrong in your whole procurement process, that you don't leverage your volumes which you've got. If you are, depending how big an organization is, obviously there's limitations what you can do, but it shows like that something is wrong in that area, that you don't leverage the relationship, that you don't leverage the volumes, that you maybe not have the right strategies in place for your suppliers. Yeah, that's kind of a sign. And obviously, when your cost of goods sold are high, that goes straight into your bottom line and into your profits of your business. And yeah, that's where you then, at the end of the day, notice it.
So much of that resonates with me as the process guy going into manufacturing operations and other types of organisations as well, and looking at work being pushed to one side. You opened with that, and instantly I could recall dozens of times that I've seen that. It's a regular occurrence. You don't have the parts, the jobs get put aside. Just parts outages, even just stopping production totally. And the amount of loss that's associated with that is staggering, and it absolutely will show up on a P&L to the extent that when you start to fix these problems, I think sometimes people are surprised at the amount of impact it has on the P&L. So there's definitely a prize there, isn't there? There's definitely something worth working towards in terms of investing in solving this puzzle.
It is definitely. And what I said before, it all starts with the planning function. I can't tell how important that is, that the organization needs to know what's going on onto the market and what their key customers are planning to do. Because if you have line of sight of that, you can align your manufacturing capacity. You don't need to plan for extra shifts. You can do the right thing at the right time. You can plan your procurement activities. And that's where the efficiencies at the end of the day come in. If you're flying blind, that's where those rushes and hiccups are coming from.
Right. So if I'm a listener and I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, well, I see all those things in my organisation. What else can they look for? If they turn and look internally and start to look for other things that add supply chain risk into their organisation, what are the sort of things that they might look for to improve or might see within the way they're currently structured that might indicate that they could have supply chain risk?
There's a saying which I'm sure you're aware of, Tony, which is coming from the IT space: people, process, technology.
Exactly.
I always think the organizations should start with the people, because if you don't have the right people with the right skill set in the right place, it's very hard to achieve anything. So when I go into the organization, apart from the process mapping, which I talk a bit later about that, is always finding out, do we actually have the right skill set for the functions which the business needs to be able to have the right outcome. And there's two ways you can approach that. One approach is you hire the right skill set if you don't have it. Actually, three it is. You can train people to have the right skill set, or you can buy the skill set. And I think that's where I see consultants can really add value. If an organization has a certain problem which they need to solve, where the expertise is not necessarily in the business, and you can bring that expertise in and solve that problem in a sustainable way. And that's the key. Like the key of success. Consultants, you should always look for that they bring value in the long term, but it doesn't help if a consultant solves your problem and then it disappears and there's dust. It needs to be sustainable, and the people need to be able to pick that up. In terms of risk management, when we talk about people, what I think is really key is leadership in an organization. So people don't only need to have skill set, they also need to have the personality to lead. And that's where a lot of businesses struggle to have that leadership, because often when you go into organizations, there's people there which are there for years, since years. And if you want to improve things, you need to change processes. And the change of processes is not every man's or every woman's thing. There's a lot of resistance normally in the organizations. So it's really important that you have kind of that change management piece right as well. So bring your people along with what you want to do, include them, make them part of the solution to have the sustainable success. That's certainly something which I'd look for. Another thing, maybe a little bit on the procurement side. I've already mentioned that before. What I've noticed in Australia, particularly in small and medium-sized organization, is that they execute the procurement function still in a very old-fashioned way. Years ago, it used to be, price, negotiate, squeeze the lemon as much as you can. I don't believe this is the way to be successful. I believe the better way be successful in your procurement function is to have a collaborative approach, particularly with key suppliers, with strategic relationships. So they need to see the value in the relationship. And if you do that well, and you can kind of make a plan with your suppliers, how can we win both out of this situation? You're way better off instead of squeezing the lemon. Because what happened during COVID, people couldn't get things, right? Because of the whole shipping situation, no containers around in Australia. And which customer are you looking for first? You're not going to look after the one which has squeezed you like a lemon. You're going to look after the one where you think you have a long-term relationship and successful business model together. That's certainly another thing. And maybe to take a third example, you stop me, Chris and Tony, if I'm talking too much.
No, please keep going. It's really interesting stuff, Reto.
Yeah. So another thing is that goes more into the technology sector. Then is data. I personally believe data is the new gold. Like an organization needs to find out what are the key data which are bringing them forward, like making them better, and then use those data with the right technology to give you a competitive advantage. There's so much space, so much going on in that space. Artificial intelligence is a key word. which is in all sorts of areas of business, which you can leverage that. But you got to have a plan, and you need to find out what's really worth it. It's not about every business has data, but most of the businesses don't know what to do with that data, and that's what you need to find out.
But I think talking about data, working with suppliers to share their data or share their schedule possibly, or sharing both sides of data to ensure that the schedule are met, the delivery are met, the quality are met, it's kind of like tricky, I guess. So what do you think about that? Marrying up the data from the supplier, from the manufacturer or the factory that you requires those parts maybe or raw material. How do you work those data? Because there's possibly, like, for example, in China, people in China or people like in the Eastern world, they are not really data literate, and sharing data possibly like a big no-no, or hey, my data is my data, and why should I share with you? So, any tips or approach that you can think of?
Well, that's the same. It goes into the same category as I said before. Not necessarily even Chinese companies. It's here in Australia. Like people think sharing data is putting them in danger. Like the old approach of running procurement is to keep everything to yourself and let the supplier guess, so that you have more power over the supplier. But in fact, it does do the opposite. Like if you share and make a plan together, that they can supply you in time with the right quality of products, maybe optimize their own production schedule through the information so that they can reduce their own cost, and then at the end of the day comes back with a better price for you. That's really the way to go. And there is, when we're talking about technology, there is supply chain planning tools out there in the market where you can support an S&OP process. So maybe for the audience who are not close to that, S&OP means sales and operations planning. And this is a process where you basically bring all stakeholders in the supply chain to the table and have a systematic approach how you create a demand plan for the business, which then results in a capacity plan in the factory and in a supply plan in the procurement sector, to align all the resources to have the best possible outcome for the business. And there's tools out there which do all those calculations for you. So based on historical data, they predict how the future can look like or could look like. You have then the sales team involved in verifying that, and based on that, it transforms all the data on your supply side, which then gives you the possibility to share that with your suppliers.
This is such an important topic, this part. If we look at those really great brands, the organizations I would call really lean organizations, they have such fantastic relationships back through the supply chain. And it was a great question, Tony, that one about the sharing of information down through the supply chain. Those organizations do that. And not only do they do it, they invest a great deal in trying to build those windows. And I certainly don't think, that's organizations overseas are more guilty of it than organizations here are. I see it all the time. And quite regularly, I would call it normal for a manufacturing organisation in Australia to probably not very well understand what its capacity is. That's not all of them. Some of them are very good at it, but a lot of the ones, particularly in the small to medium areas, don't really understand their capacity very well. They don't really have a plan. It's just get the stuff out as fast as you can and try and squeeze as much through as you can. There is no forecast to work to from sales, and that's very common. And I think that's a real problem that needs to be addressed. I think this is where the leadership that you've spoken about, Reto, comes in. You need good leadership at the top of the business to really express how important this is and provide some tools for sales. And to be fair to sales, forecasting is not an easy task either. However, there needs to be some sort of marketing plan. You need to know what products you're trying to go after, to position in the marketplace. That needs to be laid to a plan, and that leads to a forecast, which, as you say, leads to that demand plan, which then is what you can work to. It's interesting to hear you think there are a lot of good tools out there. I'm not sure if there are any you can talk about, but I'm sure our audience would be interested to know where they can go looking, perhaps, to try and find some tools to support them in that.
Yeah, flick us a message and we can come back to you with potential solution. I just want to backflip on what you just said, Chris. I think that's really, really important. And it's probably the biggest challenge when you're setting up a sales and operations planning process is to have the sales team on board. Because sales they're not used to that. They're used to sell things, and that's where their job stops. And it is really, really, really hard to get the forecast right, and you never get it 100% right. But I can tell you from experience, the more you invest in that piece and the more you having these conversations with your clients, the better you get at it. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation, because if the customer can tell you what he wants, he has a way better chance that you get the right product at the right time with reduced costs to his place.
Right, and sometimes even understanding that supplier's capacity and helping them understand your need, your demand, and things, sort of blanket contracts over a year, but just receiving the goods across that time and invoicing them at the time, and those kind of things can be very helpful as well. But that's where I think that word relationship comes into it. Supply chain relationships. Businesses don't sell to businesses; people sell to people, and building those relationships, I think, goes a long way. So one of the other things that you mentioned earlier was planning, and I suppose we've talked about that a bit already in terms of forecasting and demand planning. So that's the core, I suppose, of this supply chain management planning aspect. Are there other parts to it?
As I said, in the introduction, it goes through a red thread through the organization. The planning part, yes, it starts with the forecasting, with the demand planning, but then goes way further through the whole organization, because there's different time horizons a business needs to plan for. So normally when you set up a sales and operations planning process, you do forecasting over 12 to 18 months, let's say. It depends obviously on the business and on the industry, can vary there a bit. But really key is if you have that demand plan over 12 to 18 months, then you can look 12 to 18 months ahead, how you need to set up your manufacturing capacity, which means you can plan your investments, can plan your capital, which you need to make those investments if required. Or you can say, hey, I need a second shift by then and then and then, or I need to reduce my shift if I have a downturn, can be as well. So it just doesn't put you on the spot. You have an oversight over a long period of time. But then you have also the short to mid-term view, where you need to manage the current business, how it pins out. And we need to be realistic. No plan will be 100% achievable. That's just how business works. There's always something going wrong. There's always a machine which is stopping in the factory, or people who are sick and don't turn up to work, or whatever, you name it. That's always going to happen. But if you plan for 80% and you have 20% chaos, or if you plan for 20% and you have 80% chaos, is a massive difference. And that's what you need to get through with that. What should be the outcome through a proper supply chain planning process, in my view.
What do you think about robotics? I mean, let's jump a little bit. Like you discuss about leadership, you discuss about operation, you discuss about the sales planning. Let's jump a bit about like the warehousing and logistics. How does warehousing logistics falls under the supply chain management? Because like if we jump into the future with AI, with robotics, if you look at it, for example, Amazon, like they have like fully automated robotics to manage their warehouse, their inventory, their everything. What do you think about that? Is people still in the equation when you're saying like people, process, and technology, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, good question, Tony. I think it starts before that. Like a key responsibility of supply chain management is inventory management on all levels. So a massive cost to the business or money which is tied up within the business is in inventory, particularly in a manufacturing and trading company, right? So the more you can optimize that to have the right product at the right time available, the less pressure you have on your cash flow. That's one thing. Once you have that right, it's important how you manage that inventory, and then that's where the warehousing or stores how you call it here in Australia comes into place. And there it is like with everything, you need to find the most efficient way to bring those products either from the warehouse to the right spot in the factory or to your clients or to another side. And their technology can help you a lot. There's so many things, but which you can do depending on the state which your warehouse is. But what I'm noticing is, particularly for small, medium-sized companies, it really starts at the very start. Like I see a lot of warehouses which still work with paper, for example. Just introducing barcoding in a business as a simple step will help you a lot to increase your efficiency. You can reduce mistakes. You can increase inventory accuracy. You can increase productivity in the warehouse. And then, yeah, obviously there's lots of tools as well in that space. Like if you are a business which deals with a lot of small parts, you can go into vertical storage systems, which helps you reduce the space which you need for your warehousing, because every square meter which you have on the floor, you're paying for. So why not using the height? It goes up to crazy things where you have drones in a warehouse which are actually accounting for you. So that really depends on which in which state your business currently is, and there's certainly a lot of robotics companies in the stores, players out there which can help you automate and make things easier for your business. Did that help? Did that response what you were expecting, or?
Exactly. I mean, like as you mentioned, like businesses need to see how they operate. I mean, for smaller businesses, of course, possibly like just improving on their barcode, as you mentioned, or like some simple additional productivity in their operation that helps. And possibly like for bigger companies like Amazon, robotics and all automations, maybe that's the most effective way for them, right?
I think the key in that whole thing is that you have a systematic approach how you do things. And the way we do things when we're trying to help businesses is always, as I said, people first. And then it's about processes. So you need to understand how you're doing things currently. And a lot of businesses either don't have those processes documented, or they have documented them and don't follow them. That's a different problem. But it's really about that. And then when you have done that, you really drive for best practice. So you look at what can you do? Where are my problems? Where are my bottlenecks? And trying to define actions to improve your situation. That again, that's something where consultants certainly can help, in my view, because they have experience seeing different businesses in different stages, and yeah, people working in a business for a long run sometimes get also a little bit. We have that saying in German, company blind. I'm not sure if that exists in Australia. You just see what you used to see, and you don't have, your eyes open. And sometimes it's good to have, someone challenging you on those things and bring another side into the business.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, I think the Australian equivalent there is, well, we've always done it that way. So that's the way to do it. Yeah. It's really interesting listening to that bit about the warehouse management side of things too, because I guess if you don't get your internal supply chain part right within your own four walls and manage your inventory well, manage your warehouse well, and put some metrics and measurements in to actually demonstrate that it's performing for you, that the inventory is turning at a reasonable rate, that the stocks are accurate, even with all the work on supply chain further outside the company, you're still going to struggle to get the benefits. So I guess some of it starts internally and getting that bit right so you can realize the benefits and actually properly inform your suppliers of what you need as well.
Yeah, 100% agree, Chris. Yeah.
So look, we've covered a lot of ground there. And I think that's all been really interesting. And perhaps a good spot to finish up on is to talk about an action plan. So one of our listeners is sitting here thinking, having heard all of that, I really need to do something about supply chain management. What do you think are the building blocks that they need to layer in? How do they go about it?
I reckon it starts with what I said before. You need to find out where your problems are. Like, look out for those symptoms which we spoke about at the start of the conversation. And if you see, for example, I never have my parts. in Out of 8 hours work, 3 hours I'm looking for parts. So there's something not right. And the thing is, after that, after you know where your pain points are, I think I would start, as I said before, with mapping your processes, to understand how do we do it today, what is working well, and what is not working well. Because sometimes it's only minor adjustments which you need to do, which bring you a big change in the result. You don't need to put everything upside down. That's another danger, right? You just really need to think about what is currently working well, and don't change the things which are working well. Really focus on those things which don't work well. And then once you've done that, best practice solution finding, I think is the way to go, with external help, with internal skill set, internal education. And once you've done that, bring your people along with the changes. Sometimes it's also a danger that you load too much at once on a wagon. So maybe sometimes baby steps are more effective than doing a big bang. Because if you want to bring people along, it's really, really important that the first steps which you take are successful. If the first steps which you're taking are successful, people starting to believe in it, and then you have those people automatically on board. And once you've done that, I think then it's really important to see where can technology help you to get more efficient. But before that, people, processes, and then taking the advantages of the technology, and maybe talk to Tony about it. He's all over that. Where you can get the benefits of the modern technology.
Yeah, fantastic. I think you've outlined some really good points and some really good pathways for people to better prepare their supply chains for the future. And just in case, is there anything we haven't asked you tonight that we probably should have asked you? Did we miss anything critical out, do you think?
Well, look, so supply chain is such a broad topic. We probably could talk about 20 hours about that whole thing. But I think, the key message hopefully could bring across. And yeah, if our audience needs help and wants to know more, flick us a message, and we can always jump on a call and yeah, explore.
And where can people reach you, Reto, if they want to do exactly that?
My email is reto@rfsce.com. Or get in contact with Chris and Tony. They know me as well. From that point of view, there's plenty of options here.
Terrific. Well, we'll put some links into the comments below. And of course, if you have any questions or want to comment, please feel free to do so. And as Reto said, if you'd like to talk more to any one of us, please do feel to reach out. So thanks for listening. Reto, thank you very much for being with us today. It's been an inspiring conversation, actually. I've really enjoyed it. And I've got no doubt that's been of terrific interest to everyone listening.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Tony.
Thank you, Reto. Thank you, Chris.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode. We'll look forward to seeing you again on one of our next topics. All the best.